It's a Tuesday, almost afternoon, about 11:45, and I need to go and do a little bit of recording. I've been involved in a tape recorder correspondence, and we've been using micro cassette tapes, and now we're starting to use compact cassette tapes. And I thought it would be fun to kind of talk a little bit about micro cassette or compact cassette audio tapes, letter and correspondence, and how you kind of go about doing that, and maybe what you might need. And well, I'm down here at one of my neighborhood, not really neighborhood, but in this general part of town, about a mile away from my house. Park I used to hang out at when I was a kid. This is the park where my brother and I found I think we found a golf club and a golf ball sitting in the park here, and we took turns hitting the ball around the park. And then, who was it? Was it my brother or was it me? One of us. We swung the club as hard as we could, and the golf ball went flying, and it hit the metal garage door of one of these houses back here. It made a loud banging noise, and we immediately dropped the golf club and walked along the park like nothing happened. No, it wasn't us. It wasn't us. Never mind. I'm reminded of that lyric from the Pink Floyd song, "Kicking Around on a Piece of Ground in Your Hometown." And you live in the same town you grew up in and hanging out at the same parks and stuff as when you were a kid. That's kind of an interesting experience. But that's not why we came here today. We're going to talk about tape recorders and audio correspondence. So a good question to ask might be, why would you want to do a cassette tape correspondence to anybody? And I guess the answer to that really has to do with if you have a fondness or a love for older technology like cassette tape. It is kind of fun. It's not just the fact that they do record audio, but it's the fact that it's an older magnetic media, and the machines themselves, the tape recorders and players, are kind of fun to play with. So if you don't really enjoy that, this is probably not for you. You could just as easily Skype somebody, or have a video conference or whatever on your phone to somebody. Cassette tape is an interesting way to do correspondence, and there is a history of this that goes back into decades ago, and back in the 1950s, I'd say probably it started, or maybe even earlier. But there were cassette tape clubs. People used the little 3-inch, I think, reel-to-reel tape, quarter-inch tape, and they would record little audio letters, and they would mail them maybe overseas to relatives. And the reason why they did that is back then the postal rates, the international postal rates, were cheaper than long distance phone calls overseas. So it was better to record your message, you have a little family recording or whatever, and mail it off in a little cardboard box with a little 3-inch reel of tape, and it was cheaper than a long distance phone call. That's not true these days, but for just a couple dollars you can mail off a cassette tape in a padded envelope in the US, anywhere in the United States. So it's not that expensive, but it is kind of fun. So one of the things you're going to have to think about is what format are you going to want to record in. And of course the two main formats of tape to consider are going to be micro cassette and what you might call regular size cassette or compact cassette. And the difference is that, of course, micro cassette runs at about half the speed of compact cassette, so the quality is a lot lower, and it's monaural, and the quality is really for dictation purposes, voice purposes only. It's not really high fidelity. Whereas with compact cassette, depending on the machine and your microphone and all that, you can get some pretty good quality audio. But I would suggest, for the purposes of an audio correspondence with somebody, it's not really that important to have high fidelity unless the kinds of sounds that you're sharing are more than just voice. Like my friend Mitch and I, we do this tape correspondence, and it's fun to put in some location sounds. Like I really enjoyed Mitch's tape from a few months ago where he went out in the morning and you could hear the sound of his shoes crunching on the snow, the sound of him opening his car door and getting in it and closing it, and kind of those interior sounds of a car as you're moving around in the seat, and the sound of the engine starting up, and the sound of the keychain dangling in the ignition switch, that kind of thing. It's kind of fun to hear all that on tape, and it doesn't require a whole lot of fidelity to enjoy that. So today I brought with me, for the purposes of this talk, I have a little Sony MC60 microcassette tape, and this is the tape that Mitch and I have been doing our letter exchange with, and it's time for me to record a response, and so I've been recording my response. So microcassette plays from the right reel to the left reel. It plays in the opposite direction from compact cassette. If you're holding it with the open side of the tape down, it plays from the right side to the left side, whereas compact cassette plays from the left side to the right side, just so you know. But I'm currently using this realistic Model 51 microcassette recorder player, and it has a built-in microphone, of course, but what I'm actually using is an external microphone. And I found, especially through Mitch's wisdom of his experience, I found that external microphones for both compact cassette and microcassette, they work a lot better than using the internal microphone on the unit itself, because on the internal microphones you're going to pick up a lot of the sounds of the mechanism turning are transmitted vibrationally through the plastic body, and the microphone picks that up, and it sounds like you're inside of a machine, which the microphone literally is inside of a machine. That's why you're hearing all that noise. It's better to pop a microphone into the mic jack, external mic jack, and record that way. I also brought this Olympus Pearl Quarter. This is a L200 Pearl Quarter. It's powered by 2 AAA batteries, and this is actually one of these microcassette recorders that has pretty decent audio quality from the built-in microphone itself on board. It will adapt an external microphone, but it is a 2.5mm jack, so you're going to need a 2.5mm to 3.5mm adapter if you're using a standard 3.5mm microphone cable. But these are actually pretty decent, not too bad for just the onboard mic itself. And these were highly valued back in the 1980s and 90s when microcassettes were in their heyday. These were like the top models, the Olympus Pearl Quarters. So when you get into compact cassette or full cassette tapes, the choices are interesting because you have like Walkman type players, but a lot of Walkman players weren't able to record, and nor did a lot of them have external mic jacks. So then you also have the shoebox style tape recorders that are battery powered, usually off of C-cell batteries, and those can vary in quality. I know there are a few new ones out there for sale on places like Amazon. I've reviewed some of those in the past in this the tape series of videos I've done here, but a lot of those are just not great quality. I recently got a Panasonic compact shoebox size recorder, and that's actually pretty good, especially with an external microphone. But this is a little compact cassette player that I got recently, and this is a Handy Cassette 2, and it is a really good quality player recorder. I'm really surprised how good it is. It's powered by a little pack of 4 AA batteries, and it has not only the normal playback and record controls, but it has several different playback speeds. You can record in an extra slow speed, and you can choose between stereo and mono, and you can choose to play back either the front or back track, so you can actually play a normal cassette backwards. And on the other side here, you not only have the volume, but you have a tone and a balance control. You can put index marks on the tape, and you can play it at various speeds and pitches. You can alter the speed and pitch. I brought it out because it is battery powered. It has these nice little feet on the bottom. It sits on the table pretty handily, and we'll try this out also. Okay, let's talk about microphones. Microphones are a kind of a complicated subject. For the purposes of these consumer electronics devices, we're talking microphones with a 3.5mm input on most of these machines. So the 3.5mm input, with the exception of like the micro cassettes, like the Olympus Pearl Quarter might have a 2.5mm, and again you'll need an adapter for that. You can get dynamic mics, you can get condenser mics where they have their own batteries powering it, and you can get like super cardioid or shotgun mics, etc., lapel mics. I'm currently favoring, when I do these outside recordings of field recordings, I kind of like having a external shotgun mic, and you don't have to spend an awful lot of money. This is just one example. This is a Takstar SGC-598. This is designed really as a video microphone. It has a hot shoe mount up here. You can mount it to the hot shoe of a camera, but the hot shoe also has a 1/4-20 socket, so you can plug in a tripod to it. What I'm currently using it with is I have this little kind of a GoPro style adapter, and then I have a little Gumby, not a Gumby, but a little flexible tripod that I kind of use as a hand grip, so I can hand grip it, but also if I spread the legs out, I can set it on a table, and I can, because of the adjustable GoPro mount, I can have it angled up at my mouth, at my face, so on a table it'll sit there and point back up to me. So this is a kind of a handy little thing, but these video microphones have a short little cord, so you want to use an adapter cable, an external extension cable. This is a nice little one here that it gives you room, like 3 feet or so, to connect to your tape recorder. But with this unit, I can, even with the handy cassette 2, I can kind of hold them both in one hand like this if I need to go one-handed. So the Takstar has, of course, an on-off switch with an indicator light. So when you turn it on, there's a green light that comes on. You may not be able to see it in the bright light here. But there is a decibel attenuation pad, so it's 0 dB or plus 10 dB. I find using this with the handy cassette 2, the 0 dB works fine, and also on the micro cassette realistic micro 51, the 0 dB setting works good. And then there's this low frequency roll-off switch where you can attenuate the low frequency sounds if you're getting some humming or some kind of rumble in there, but I usually operate it flat. This microphone comes with a foamy cover, but it's not quite as wind resistant as a full dead cat, fuzzy kind of wind muff. So in windy conditions, you're going to probably want to get a dead cat kind of an adapter to this to make it a little bit better quality sound. Okay, so we have our microphone turned on, plugged in, a tape put in the machine, ready to go. All the controls are set. So let's do a test recording. Hit the button here. Okay, this is Joe Van Cleve out in the city park of Albuquerque with the Takstar microphone plugged into the handy cassette 2, doing a test recording out in the field with a little, about a 3-foot cable on here, an extension cable. Just doing a test recording. It's not super breezy right now, but the wind does gust up here once in a while, so hopefully this recording will be nice. All right, turn the mic off. Let's rewind it and listen to it. I'm going to just put it in the play mode and then do the review mode because I don't have a tape counter to reference where I started here. So, play. Okay, this is Joe Van Cleve out in the city park of Albuquerque with the Takstar microphone plugged into the handy cassette 2, doing a test recording out in the field with a little, about a 3-foot cable on here, an extension cable. Just doing it. So it's really fun. You can get some pretty good quality audio out of standard compact cassette tape with an external microphone. There are a lot of microphone options. I kind of like the Takstar for the use with audio tape is because it's, first of all, it's directional. So you're going to be able to isolate the location sounds around you and get your voice. It also, because it's directional, you can use it kind of like a field recorder. You can point it in the direction of whatever sound is present, like birds up in the tree or the dog barking or something, interesting you want to put on tape. But also, it has a rather brilliant sound. It doesn't reproduce the low end quite as well as a more expensive microphone, but it has a lot of high end, which actually works pretty well for compact cassette and micro cassette that doesn't have Dolby noise reduction. It kind of makes the high end a little more brilliant, kind of compensating for the high end roll off of the format. And then finally, the microphone itself, these are like under $30 on Amazon, and they're powered by a AA battery. So it's a pretty interesting little mic for use with the field recording. So I do want to finish my tape to Mitch, and so I'm going to take this realistic micro 51, put the microphone into it here, And then I want to take our tape and put that in there like that and get it there. Get my microphone, make sure it's turned on. Yes, it's on. And I'm just going to do a brief little recording out here for Mitch, part of our tape that we're doing here. So here it goes. Well, Mitch, I am out in a city park with the Micro 51 Realistic and the Takstar microphone, and I'm currently recording a video, which you're probably going to see before you get this tape. Recording a video, a little bit of how to use consumer-grade cassette tape recorders with external microphones out in the field for kind of doing like audio letters or kind of location sound recording. But here I am doing this little test recording for you. Joe out. Well, okay. There's my little recording, and how much tape do I have left on this thing? I'm getting down there. I have a few minutes left on the tape. So one thing that interests me about audio recording is how it seems to still be kind of ubiquitous. I mean, you think about, we've gone from film to video to now YouTube, and there's millions of YouTube channels and everybody watches videos, and yet audio is a persistent format. And why is that? That's kind of interesting, right? I mean, the term podcast has become ubiquitous to our culture, even though most people don't listen to podcasts on iPods, which is or MP3 players, which is kind of where the term derived from. So the whole iPod has become part of the language, part of the vernacular, like the way some people say, I want a Coke, and they mean I want some kind of a soda. It doesn't necessarily have to be a Coca-Cola, but the pod has become ubiquitous, right? So people are still listening to audio, which is amazing. It really is. You go back all the way into the 19th century and the early Edison recordings and things like that, and you think, well, how did we get to the point where we're still listening to audio-only recordings? Maybe it has to do with stories. People love stories. And if that's the case, then perhaps that's part of the appeal, at least to me, of working with cassette recording, at least for these kind of personal correspondence, like audio letters. I'm sure there's a strong part of it that deals with just my sense of nostalgia, that I enjoyed compact cassette as a young boy, and later I enjoyed microcassettes, and I just like the format of tape. Tape is surprisingly rugged, and it takes decades and decades before the signal starts to degrade significantly. And then I've talked about this before, but I like the format. I like the fact that it's a physical media. The cassette tape is a physical media. It's private. Like, nobody else knows what that tape is. I can mail it to somebody through the post. It remains pretty secure. On the contrary, if you put a MP3 file up on some file sharing website that might be owned by some alphabet related corporation, you don't really know if they're listening to it or not, do you? Are they listening to it? Are they sifting it for clues? You don't know that. Well, so there's a little bit of a privacy thing to doing these tape letters, but it's nostalgia also. But if you're interested in tape, especially for the purposes of doing these kind of recordings, personal correspondence recordings, a good quality microcassette recorder like these Olympus Pearl Quarter L200s. Some of the realistic recorders or Radio Shack brand are really surprisingly good. But one of the quality things you want to look for is whether it uses AC bias during the record process, or conversely, it could be using a permanent magnet instead. The permanent magnet kind of biasing isn't as good. You're not going to get as good a quality recording. But if it has AC bias, it's going to be pretty good. And a lot of those realistic machines did. And as far as compact cassettes that are available today, I think the Handy Cassette 2 you might be able to find on eBay and they are pretty well made. I'm pretty surprised actually at how well they work, and with an external microphone they have a pretty good sound. There's also the Panasonic recorder that I mentioned. They seem to be available once in a while on Amazon, but they're $200 or $300. I don't know the exact price. They're kind of pricey, but they're certainly a lot better in record quality than the inexpensive shoebox recorders that you get nowadays that are, you know, under $50 or whatever. They just aren't very good for recording. So it's kind of like the typewriter thing. I think there's a similarity there. You're going to have to look at some high quality used equipment in order to find good quality recording. And for the purposes of these kind of letters, we're talking about portable recorders, battery-powered recorders. Now, you could certainly get a cassette deck, a hi-fi component type cassette deck, that 19-inch rack mount or whatever, that's AC powered and you can't take it portably with you out in the field. And I think my whole point of doing audio letters and this kind of personal audio correspondence is when you're out in the field, it really gives you the opportunity to record location sound and be out here where they can hear your sounds that are around you, and they can kind of enjoy the experience of where you're at as well. That's one of the things that I've been trying to do, is I try to incorporate sounds of what I'm doing, and it just makes the whole audio experience a lot better. The way we manage this, by the way, is usually we'll use the same tape over and over, and one person chooses side A and the other person chooses side B. The recipient listens to side A and records his response on side B and then sends it back. Now, what I've found works really well is when you're playing back your friend's tape, you write down or type the major subject matter that he talked about, because he might have questions he'd like for you to answer. He might mention something that you might want to respond to. So it's a good idea to do a little transcription, just the general subject matter he's talking about, and maybe issues or questions he has that you want to reply to. And then I'll typically archive those with a date, the date of the tape and the date that I recorded it, and send it back to him. So then I have kind of a record, ongoing record of our correspondence, because once you record over your previous recording, you sent the tape to him, he sends a reply, and then you're going to record over your side again. You're not necessarily going to have a copy of that. So my experience with these cassette tape letters is just enjoying the moment of listening to them, and make a little paper ledger of the major subject matter that was in the tape. You can keep that, refer to it later, so you know, oh, I mentioned this in a previous tape. I made a story, I told a story about something. Yeah, I've already done that. I don't have to repeat myself. And that comes out really good. That's a handy way to manage the subject matter of this correspondence back and forth. Side A, side B, each person has a side, and they use that side. Use the same tape over and over. Now, the other thing that takes some getting used to when you're doing these audio tape letters is you have to remember to take the tape player and your microphone with you. There has been numerous times when I've gone and done something, and I come back only later to think, oh, crumb, I could have been recording the audio of this experience for my tape correspondent, my tape buddy. You know, so you kind of have to be thinking in your daily life, thinking or being conscious of the fact that there are opportunities for you to record audio for these letters. I think it works better this way. I mean, you could just sit down and say, okay, I got to knock out a tape, and you could sit down and you could record one continuous session, get it all done, and that's an easy way to do it. But it's a little more fun and a little better for the recipient if you can split up the tape into multiple scenes, multiple clips that have been recorded in various parts of your daily life over the course of days and even weeks. You know, so the passage of time is kind of described there. I usually will indicate what day I started the recording. Like, oh, now I'm walking up to the barber shop, like for instance I did this morning. And I'll usually indicate which machine I'm recording with and which microphone I'm using in the case of us geeks who have more than one recorder and microphone. It breaks up the monotony of just sitting in your office making one recording. So you have the experience of all the sounds around you, the traffic noise and the dogs barking and the wind blowing and the birds chirping and all that. Well, so that's it. Audio tapes, audio correspondence, using either micro cassette or compact cassette, portable battery operated recorders, external microphone, maybe a small little tripod to hold the microphone if it's a camera mounted microphone. These are a lot of fun. I'd encourage you guys to find yourself an audio correspondent, a tape buddy that you can send a letter to in the form of a cassette tape. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun just doing recordings on audio, just recording your life, recording your thoughts, recording your location sounds for posterity. This is what it sounded like standing in a city park on a cool late winter, early spring Tuesday in Albuquerque. This is Joe Van Cleve. Stay creative and have yourselves a great day. Bye-bye for now. Well, here I am, sitting at the city park. It's a nice, cool day.